There we go. Hey guys, this is Amanda Kelly with This Art Called Life, coming at you on day 13 with my Let There Be Light series. So yeah, we have been through a journey so far, and the journey continues on. So yesterday I dove into, well, it was 12/12, so I dove into a little bit of those because it was a special day energetically wise. That was the 12/12 gateway, opening up the portal. That's going to be fully opened on the 21st. Yeah, so we're kind of like preparing, and the past few months have been preparing us. Yeah, and then we were getting into the greatest show in the universe, kind of big picture, what's actually happening right now, battle of the dark versus light. So today I want to dive in more specifically to confronting the collective shadow, getting into the system and the layers of corruption and greed and control that exists. It's kind of the yucky stuff, the stuff that's really not that easy to confront. So we started off really kind of with a more individual focus and, getting into the ideas of standing in your own light, what that actually means, and then also diving into the shadow work, because it's important to face the shadows, because we cannot heal what we cannot see. We cannot heal what we cannot face. So as true as that is for the individual, it's also true for the collective. And as I was kind of getting into yesterday, the influx of light is actually kind of shining light into the shadows, into the darkness, and it's illuminating what's been hidden. It's kind of, exposing these skeletons in the closet, if you will. So there's been a lot of stuff coming up, and the darker forces have been trying to sweep it all under the rug and keep it hidden, because if it comes out into the light, then the whole game is up. So it's not really easy to face these things, because it totally disrupts our understanding of reality. So it's really difficult to confront these truths. And but it's very important at the same time. It wasn't the easiest thing for me to outline, but at the end of the day, it's very important that we acknowledge what's actually going on behind the scenes so that we can begin to fix it. Because if we can't see the bigger picture, if we can't address it, acknowledge it, and say, okay, yeah, this is something that's happening, then we can't actually heal it, we can't actually fix it. So so let's dive in. So there's so many, I'm not going to be able to address everything here, obviously, because I'm not going to sit here for hours, because we could dive in for hours and hours and hours. But let's start at the basic levels of the system and how it's not been working for us, because I think for the most part, I'm just going to shut my door here. For the most part, we can acknowledge that the system hasn't really been working for us at the level of healthcare, at the level of education, at the level of our food system, at the level of our political system. If we really take a step back, even entertainment is part of the whole bigger picture, the system, and how it's been actually used against us, which I'll dive into a little bit later. But what we're really going through right now is war. This is a war on consciousness. It's a war on spirituality. It's a war on truth. It's a war on freedom, because we are all sovereign beings, but the way that everything has been set up, the way the game has been rigged, is to keep us out of our power, to keep us, blocked from seeing the truth, to keep us small, and to keep us more easily controlled. So yes, if that sounds dark, it's because it is. And unfortunately, it's actually, the bigger picture of what is happening, what has been happening for 100 years. If you are alive right now, the truth has been withheld from you. So yes, these are very, very big, long, dark shadows that must be confronted. And it's a little scary because there's a very dark agenda. And I want to be really clear. Most people, even at the top of who we think are in control, are not actually. Many of them are just puppets. They're chess pieces being played, being controlled by people that are even more powerful. And when we really get into it, it's all about the money. So where is the money coming from in the first place, and who is pulling the strings? So I am going to be very careful about some of the words that I use here as well. I think my title alone may, I hope it doesn't trigger anything, but the fact is as well that they have been doing their best to keep the truth in the shadows right now by all means possible. Many accounts have been taken down. Many accounts have been shadow banned. I don't know if that's the thing that they'll like look for or not, but think about it. And like keeping it in the shadows, but what they're putting in the shadows is the truth. So we have to get it out there. So at the same time, I'm trying to be careful. So just bear with me as I address these topics. If I need to use kind of strange phraseology, if that makes sense. I'm doing my best here, but so if we start from the level of our food system to keep it really grounded and tangible, let's take a look at the foods that we know are not healthy for us. Sugar, dairy, meat. Now again, everything in moderation, but we know for a fact that added sugars are really, really bad for us. Diabetes and Alzheimer's is now known as early onset, or not early onset diabetes. It is known as diabetes 3 in a lot of people's knowledge now. They have linked it directly to sugars and the ability to process sugars, but a diet very high in sugars. And it's kind of known as well, although not maybe fully embraced and acknowledged at a grander scale, but yes, many scientific studies have proven that sugar, quote unquote, feeds cancer as well. So we know sugar isn't good. Sugar has been subsidized by the government. Dairy, subsidized. We know that certain proteins in dairy feed cancer as well, and that the industry itself the factory farming, there's a lot of hormones and antibiotics, and all of these substances are getting absorbed into our bodies, and that's not cool. Oh, pesticides as well. Same thing with meat industry. So if we're talking organic, grass-fed, pasture-raised, all of that goodness, fine, eat the way that feels right for your body. But at the end of the day, and natural, I love dessert, natural sugars, minimal sweetness, like dark chocolate, that kind of thing. Yeah, maybe don't go to town completely, but by all means enjoy. We are humans having an embodied experience, and one of the things that we are meant to experience in this life is pleasure. So, and food is part of that. So I'm not trying to, say all of this stuff is across the board bad, but it's the way that our system is currently set up. It is not designed for our well-being. We have minimal nutrients coming out of the soil because the soil has been depleted. A massive amount of pesticides, a massive amount of antibiotics and hormones are being injected into the animals in particular, which is why it's even more crucial to focus on plant-based eating, but also our perception of what a balanced diet looks like has been very skewed. Not to mention the GMOs, the additives, the chemicals in the processed foods that we've all been conditioned to believe should make up a good chunk of our diet as well. So unfortunately, it also is cheaper, so they, or the organic healthy food is more expensive, so it's not as accessible, but we've also been conditioned to just choose the cheap option. And we're spending so much more on insurance and healthcare, whereas a much larger percentage of our paychecks used to go to food. Back in the day, a massively greater amount of our paychecks went to food. And let's go back a couple thousand years. The father of medicine, Hippocrates, what did he say? Let food be thy medicine, right? So we have become so disconnected from that alone. And if we think about the funding in the government and how that whole system operates, that should be clue one, that they're not really thinking about our best interests in that way. So let's take a look at the healthcare system next, since it's linked to that very directly. This is my opinion, but I think it's more fact than opinion. Our healthcare system is not a healthcare system. It is a sick care system. And medicine isn't about medicine and healing, it is about pharmaceuticals. That is a huge disconnect from nature, right? So we have also been conditioned to believe that popping these pills and taking these medications is the best way to help us move forward. I don't even know if people think that it's going to cure them at this point. Newsflash, they probably won't, because pharmaceuticals are designed to address symptoms, not the root cause. And this is nothing against doctors, because as intelligent as they are, it's very siloed thinking, the way their the medical school is set up as well, deliberately by design. It is a pharmaceutical school. It's a pharmaceutical indoctrination, to be a little bit more extreme about it. All they learn is pharmaceutical intervention. They have become very disconnected from true health and healing. It's kind of astonishing to me, because I used to study a lot of biology. Biology 101 is kind of left at the door. They get about, on average, 5 hours of nutrition, if you weren't aware of that. So that is a little bit mind-boggling and eye-opening for many people. It was for me. But it's also interesting to me, because we don't expect, everybody is so specialized, at the expense of this holistic way of viewing the body and health and healing, which is everything is integrated, nothing is separated. Mind and body are not separated. So yeah, if we take a look at it from that perspective, then we wouldn't ask our dermatologist for specific advice on healing cancer. Likewise, we wouldn't ask our oncologist for advice on lady issues necessarily. So if we think of it from that way, then by extension, why do we expect our oncologists to know all there is about nutrition? They don't go to nutrition school. They get about 5 hours of it total. Can almost guarantee you may know more about nutrition than an oncologist does. Now, that's a very massive generalization. Many of them are reading on their own, researching, but they tend to be more focused on research that's related to their discipline. And there is such a thing as confirmation bias, that's psychology. So they tend to read and gravitate toward articles that support their current knowledge. After going through so much school, you can hardly blame somebody for believing that they really do know all there is to know, or anything that supports that current paradigm of knowledge is valid, and anything else that is counter to that is less valid. So that's the unfortunate truth. There's also such thing as this confirmation bias exists in the world of publishing as well. So the articles that actually get published in the first place, that get funding in the first place, really dictates the direction of medical research. So this all goes hand in hand, and it really becomes quite eye-opening when you realize how much money comes into play and how many people are pulling the strings behind the scenes when it comes to our understanding of science. So there's that. The education, there's a lot that could be said about that too, but I want to kind of touch on a bunch of different areas so the bigger picture becomes a little more clear. The education system, not really designed to optimize creativity. Look at the things that they cut funding from. They cut funding from the arts, they cut funding from physical education. That basically we take children who are meant to learn by play, through playing and exploring, and we force them to sit at desks in concrete boxes, and we then blame them and say something is wrong with them if they, act up by wanting to run around and play and, want to speak out. We're basically just suppressing their natural urges to express themselves and to learn by interacting with their environment. So it's really, really counter to our natural inclinations and modes of learning. So Montessori school is a good example of a better way of doing things. And then if you haven't been fully indoctrinated by the system and you don't, fit into this perfect box, then you're kind of relegated to the sidelines and made to feel not as good. And this idea that everybody should be able to go to college, okay, at surface level, at face value, that sounds lovely, and yes, I believe everybody should be able to access the education that they feel called to, by all means. That said, college isn't for everyone, and it shouldn't be made to be the end-all be-all goal for everyone, because people have different gifts that need to be developed as well. And think about what it takes to be a successful adult in society. What happened to basic communication 101? What happened to emotional intelligence? What happened to mindset? What happened to basic finance 101? These days, marketing 101. I feel like all of these things should be embedded into our high school education, not even college. Let's not talk about college, because that should be something that people pursue if they want to pursue a more specialized discipline. And so even just looking at the way our educational system is, what we learn, it is not really set up for our success ultimately. So there's that. And then politics, I'm not going to get into too deeply. That said, there's so much money behind in pulling the strings behind who gets elected and who votes on what, that they're not representing the citizens who quote unquote vote them in. The election issues that are coming up right now are a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down, and I just don't feel like opening that Pandora's box right now, but it is a major box that can be opened. But anyway, look at campaign funding, campaign finance. That should be not allowed at all, special interests, lobbying, all of that. And then you just follow the money, trace it all back, and you start to see how things are not as, and I think that one, we know there's a lot of corruption in politics, but here's the other layer, is that most of the politicians aren't actually calling the shots, and a lot of it's a show. So this is getting into a deeper layer, but yeah, there is a level that are it does go back to money, the very, very, very wealthy elite of the world, but many of them are not well-known names. So this is, I don't want to use particular words right now, so I feel like this video is already getting less reach, so there's that. But it's not politics is not what it seems. Let's just put it that way. And then even entertainment, there's a great deal of programming in entertainment. And what I mean by programming is conditioning or even brainwashing. Again, trying to keep certain words to a minimum. But yeah, it's really, once you take a step back and look at all of the movies out there and what they're showing us right now, and even in children's movies, it is quite shocking and borderline horrifying to see how they are conditioning us right now, and indoctrinating us and kind of brainwashing us into thinking that these certain ideas are okay. They're planting seeds for things that, you know, may happen down the road, and we have no idea. The truth is stranger than fiction. That's a great way of looking at it. So, oh gosh, okay, so there's so many, I've already been talking for a while, and there's so many layers of things. So I think also what I want to address right now is that, you know, the reason I've been quiet and saying weird things is that freedom of speech is under attack right now. And unless you have one particular belief system, you're not allowed to speak out. And that's kind of what I was getting into earlier, is that the truth is being shut down. So it is quite astonishing because it is our First Amendment right, freedom of speech. And if you actually look at the media, literally, like, they are, every single network, everyone on the left, including the quote unquote right, they have word for word the exact same scripting. It's terrifying if you actually think about it. That is definition propaganda. So yeah, it's a wild time to be alive right now, that's for sure. You know, medical freedom right now is under threat, you know, with threatened of certain things. So, you know, freedom of choice right there. I don't know. I would like to be able to determine what goes into my body myself, especially when there's zero safety behind everything right now. Yeah, and already preliminary results are finding that it's not really great. There are a lot of effects. And then, you know, even getting into the water system, fluoride has been pumped into the water system for decades now, and what fluoride does is it calcifies the pineal gland. And the reason that's not cool is because it disconnects us from our ability to tune in to our intuition as well as to our higher selves, to tune into higher consciousness. And this is deliberate. This is to keep you from accessing your full power, from accessing your full gifts, from accessing your full potential. And at that point, you're asleep and it's easier. Well, you're disempowered, number one. And then in that state, you are more easily controlled and manipulated. So we are basically living in an inverted matrix where, you know, everything is anti-life. Life is about expansion and growth. Everything right now is designed to keep us in little boxes. Fear is used, number one, right now to keep us in a disempowered state. And I've gone into that in depth in my other videos, how fear keeps our energy bubbles small, how it keeps us disempowered and disconnected and in a state of victimhood, basically. When we're in fear, we are looking outside for help. We are disconnected from our sense of empowerment, from our sense of autonomy. So the fear is very deliberately used as a form of control, mind control. And it is basically psychological warfare. So it's really insidious and it's quite dark. I acknowledge that fully. This is why it wasn't the easiest thing to put together. But what we are facing right now is like 1984 style Orwellian state. So that's terrifying. So number one suggestion, if you want to dive in deeper to some of the rabbit holes that exist, and there are an astonishing amount that I haven't even touched on because it gets really deep, but follow the money is number one. Who's funding and who's funding what and who is benefiting, but it's also beyond the money. It is all about control and manipulation right now, because it's not about them gaining more wealth even at this point. It is about literal population control. And this has been an agenda that's been going on, and they've set it up. It was decades in the making, over a century in the making minimum. The American dream, it was always just meant to be that, a dream. And most of us were never meant to achieve it. And that's just a sad reality. Like, it was just a fluffy distraction, as like little bit by little bit, they were doing this, doing that with our food system, with our medical system, more and more pharmaceuticals, pumping more and more drugs into our bodies, more and more fluoride keeping us asleep and shut down. And little by little, here we are, one disaster after another, and we could get into that. But 2020 is a culmination of all of that, and none of this was an accident. It was all pre-planned. So here we are. But yeah, think about who funds the media, who funds the politicians, who funds the food supplies that are really compromised right now, or who subsidizes them might be a little bit a better way to look at that. So, and again, the thing that should alarm you the most is that the truth is being shut down. They are, everything. They are shutting down voices that are counter to the narrative. So this alone is something that should alarm you dramatically. So there's a lot of deep, dark stuff that I only touched the surface of here, but even that, there's a lot. So I encourage you to question everything. So number one, follow the money. Number two, question everything. Question everything that you have been led to believe, and question everything about the way the system is set up. Everything that the media tells you, question all of it. Question the agendas, question who that might serve, and question whether it's truly serving you. Is this empowering you? Is it keeping you in your freedom or out of your freedom? Because right now, this is an attack on freedom. And it's an attack on being a sovereign being. And this is who we are here to be. We are here to embody our fullest, most expansive expressions as sovereign beings, as divine sovereign beings. So this isn't easy stuff to talk about or think about. These ideas have been trickling into my consciousness for several years. So if this is all brand new, then it's a lot. And I understand if it's too much, because it sometimes takes multiple times of hearing something for the kernel of truth to land deeply enough that you are ready to acknowledge it. So I acknowledge that and just trust, but also we are going to just stay in this idea that the light has already won, and this is the dark's attempt, their last attempt to, their last grasp at control. So I am going to end it there for today, because that was a lot. If you have any questions, I'm really happy to send resources, avenues that you can go down, dive a little deeper. And yeah, but also know that I am standing here holding down the light, holding down the truth, and I am sending you so much light and love and so much compassion on your journey, because these are not easy truths to confront, and there's so much more. That is the truth. So it's a time for us to connect as best we can, and to come together and to hold down the light, to share the light, to share the love as much as possible. So thank you for staying open. Thank you for being here. Thank you for shining your light as brightly as you possibly can. Thank you for showing up for you, because the more that you show up for you, the more you'll be able to show up for others. Onward and upward, guys, and we will be talking more and more about the light as well. So just a heads up. It's not all darkness and despair, and the light has won. Onward and upward. Love you guys.